The film opens with something chilling. The real recorded audio of a hearing from Mike Williams' testimony. Right from the start, it's clear that this is more than just a story. These events really happened, and they set the tone for what's coming. Next, we see an oil pipeline run deep into the sea, stretching for miles beneath the surface. Everything seems fine until a small robot is sent down to inspect the pipeline. It's not an ordinary check. This ROV, remotely operated vehicle, has to make sure the system is working smoothly and safely. As it glides through the water, the robot reaches a critical part of the pipeline, the blowout preventer. Now, this device is very important. It is a mechanical valve device used to seal, control, and monitor oil and gas wells to prevent blowouts, the uncontrolled release of crude oil or natural gas from a well. The robot carefully inspects the preventer, looking for any sign of malfunctioning. After completing the task, the robot begins its journey back to the surface when something unexpected happens. Two bubbles, just two, start to rise from the depths of the sea right in front of everyone watching. We meet Mike. He wakes up to his wife Felicia talking about a dream. She dreamt of a large rabbit mimicking her, and she's convinced the rabbit was her mother. It's obvious Mike wasn't a fan of his mother-in-law, but the conversation doesn't linger there for long. They get up and prepare for their day. Before heading out, they listen to their daughter Sydney's presentation. Sydney's set to talk about her dad in school, and in her eyes, Mike isn't just any guy working on an oil rig. He tames the dinosaurs. There's a touching moment when she asks Mike to bring her a dinosaur tooth to back up her claim. It's a sweet father-daughter moment, but there's a sense of dread beneath it. Then we meet Andrea Fleitas, on her way to work, but nothing seems to be going right. Her car won't start, and after a frustrating attempt to fix it, her engine gives out completely. Luckily, her boyfriend steps in, offering her a ride on his motorcycle. Each of these moments feels like an everyday situation. Waking up, talking about dreams, car troubles. But there's an unsettling undercurrent running through it all. You can sense that something big is about to happen, and the small cracks in the characters' lives might just grow into something much more dangerous. Mike and Andrea have just landed at a base, ready for their journey to the massive offshore oil rig, Deepwater Horizon. They're not alone. A group of men joins them, including Jimmy Harrell. As the crew heads to the rig, there's tension in the air. Another team is leaving, even though they were supposed to finish an important job, the cement log. The main crew isn't pleased about it. Something doesn't feel right, but they have a job to do. As everyone gets busy, Mike's day takes a surprising turn. A coworker hands him a special gift, an actual dinosaur tooth. It's meant for his daughter, Sydney, and Mike can't believe his luck. It's a small but heartwarming moment in a place full of grit and danger. But even with this touching gift, there's a sense of unease around the rig. Something feels off. Meanwhile, Jimmy meets with the higher-ups, Donald Vidrine and Robert Kaluza. They're here to talk about why the other team left before finishing the cement log. Jimmy isn't happy, and he's worried about the well's safety. He insists on doing a negative pressure test on the rig. It's a critical check to make sure everything is in order. Vidrine and Kaluza argue back and forth, but in the end, they let Jimmy run the test. With the test now underway, everyone holds their breath. The entire crew knows the risks of cutting corners in a place like Deepwater Horizon. But is everything really as secure as the bosses believe? Something is building up, and the outcome could be life or death. It starts with a simple test. The crew runs a check on the drill pipe, and the results come back. A pressure reading of 1395. Don, sensing something is off, orders another test from the kill line. This time, the results are safer, giving everyone a slight moment of relief. But the work isn't over yet. As the crew begins pumping mud from the system, the pressure builds. Too much mud clogs the pipe, and suddenly, the pipe bursts, knocking the crew off their feet. It's a blowback they didn't see coming. For a moment, they managed to stop the mud from spewing, thinking they've dodged a disaster. But the danger is just beginning. The ground starts to tremble. Out of nowhere, another surge of mud shoots through the hole. This time, methane gas mixes into the equation, increasing the pressure. It's too much for the rig to handle. Then it happens. A massive explosion rips through the rig, engulfing everything in flames. Mike and Jimmy are caught in the chaos. Jimmy, simply taking a shower, finds himself injured in the blink of an eye. Mike, after a calm chat with Felicia on Skype, gets knocked backward by the force of the blast. The rig is a scene of utter destruction, and the crew must act fast if they want to survive. With the rig ablaze, the crew works furiously to contain the situation. They know their lives are at stake. But not everyone makes it. The explosion claims the lives of some of the men, and their mission shifts from stopping the disaster to escaping it. Mike teams up with technician Caleb Holloway to save the remaining crew. Together, they work under the pressure of flames and destruction, racing to get their fellow colleagues to safety. One by one, they guide the survivors to the lifeboat, the last hope for escaping the fiery nightmare. Off the rig, Andrea tries to do her part. She reaches for the radio to call a mayday, but instead of praise, she's scolded for taking action without permission. The situation grows more desperate by the minute. The rig burns. The clock is ticking. Will they make it out alive? Felicia's heart races as the news of the fire reaches her ears. Her mind floods with one thought: is her husband safe? Meanwhile, Mike finds Jimmy, barely recognizable. His eye is swollen shut, and his foot is a mess thanks to a large shard of glass. Without hesitation, Mike pulls Jimmy up and drags him towards safety. But just as they think they're getting out, the lifeboat takes off, leaving them stranded. But there's a glimmer of hope. The Coast Guard arrives, pulling in the remaining crew members. It looks like a way out, until disaster strikes again. Another explosion. Flames surge, trapping Mike and Andrea with nowhere to go. Time is running out, and the heat is unbearable. Their only option? Climb higher and make a risky leap to the boat. Andrea freezes. Her fear grips her tight, even as Mike pleads with her to jump. But what do you do when time's not on your side and you're staring down a wall of fire? Mike doesn't wait for her decision. He knows there's no time left. With one final glance, he grabs Andrea and pushes her off the rig, her life jacket securing her as she plunges toward the water. Seconds later, Mike follows. The fall seems endless, but finally they hit the water. Gasping for breath, they're pulled to safety by the Coast Guard. Relief washes over them, but behind them, the rig is still burning, sinking further into the ocean. The crew watches in silence as their escape fades into the smoke-filled horizon. As Felicia waits anxiously, not knowing if Mike made it out alive, one thing is clear: not everyone would be so lucky. The flames may be out for now, but the danger Mike and his crew have been through will stay with them for much longer. The survivors of the disaster are receiving medical treatment, but Mike faces a different kind of storm. As he steps out of the hotel, he's bombarded by reporters, desperate for answers. In the chaos, a distressed man forcefully shoves Mike against a wall, pleading for news about his son. Mike, carrying his own heavy burden, doesn't have the words to offer. After this encounter, Mike retreats to his room. The weight of everything finally crashes down on him. He tries to take a shower, but the pain is overwhelming. As he breaks down, Felicia and Sydney come to his side. They hold him tightly, offering the comfort only family can provide. In a quiet moment, Mike gives Sydney the tooth, a small but meaningful gesture, a reminder of all they've been through. Later, as Mike and his family leave, they witness the emotional reunions of others. Andrea and Caleb embrace their loved ones, while Jimmy lumps in on crutches. The scene tugs at the heartstrings, reminding us that survival isn't just about escaping the disaster. It's about piecing life together afterward. Mike and Felicia hug Jimmy, grateful for those who made it out alive. In the aftermath, Real footage of Mike Williams, Andrea Fleitas, and James Harrell giving testimonies brings the story home. Mike, deeply affected by the experience, never returned to sea. Instead, he chose a quieter life in Texas with his family. Andrea Fleitas moved to California, leaving the oil industry behind for good. James Harrell, however, remained with Transocean, continuing in the field despite everything. The disaster's consequences didn't end with the rig's destruction. Donald Vidrine and Robert Kaluza faced manslaughter charges, but the legal battle was later settled. Meanwhile, the oil spill that followed lasted an unbelievable 87 days, with over 210 million gallons of oil flooding the Gulf of Mexico. It became the worst oil disaster in history, a tragedy that affected both the environment and countless lives. 11 counts of manslaughter were slapped against them, directly connecting them to the 11 workers who lost their lives in the horrific blowout. But by 2015, those charges were dismissed. How could something this big just go away? As the film concludes, we're reminded of the 11 crew members who didn't make it. Their lives are honored, their memories cherished, but the weight of their loss lingers. This wasn't just a disaster. It was a human tragedy that left scars on families, communities, and an entire industry. It's not every day that we hear about true heroism in the face of disaster. One of the most unforgettable stories from the Deepwater Horizon tragedy is that of crane operator Aaron Dale Burkeen. When the rig was engulfed in flames, Burkeen made a split-second decision that saved many lives. He sacrificed himself to stop a burning crane from crashing onto his fellow crew members. His courage shines as a beacon of hope amidst the chaos of that fateful day. But Burkeen wasn't just a hero. He was also a close friend of Mike Williams. Mike's own survival was nothing short of miraculous. Alongside Andrea Fleitas, the rig's dynamic position operator, they escaped death by leaping into the open water as the inferno consumed the oil rig. Their struggle didn't end there, as they had to wait to be rescued, unsure of what fate had in store for them. What happened to them after? It turns out, Andrea Fleitas left the oil industry altogether, finding a new life in California. Perhaps the trauma of that night still lingers, and a different path has been chosen, far away from the dangers of offshore drilling. And what about Mike? His superior, James "Mr. Jimmy" Harrell, continues to work for Transocean, the offshore drilling company that was at the center of this disaster. This is not just a story of tragedy. It's a story of resilience, sacrifice, and survival. The movie Deepwater Horizon dramatizes this disaster and points directly at Vidrine and Kaluza's actions as the reason behind the tragedy. The film doesn't hold back in portraying them as neglectful managers whose oversight led to a deadly situation. Negligence played a huge role, and decisions were made that ultimately cost these men their lives. The suspense builds as the movie shows just how much of the tragedy could have been avoided. You're left questioning whether anyone really pays the price when corporate negligence leads to disaster. Vidrine and Kaluza's legal escape makes the ending even more painful, because for the families of the victims, there was no escape from their grief. But does the law always deliver justice, or does it sometimes fall short? While Vidrine and Kaluza walked away, the loss of life and the environmental destruction remain as brutal reminders of the consequences of unchecked decisions. The real-world tragedy of Deepwater Horizon stands as a stark example of what happens when those in charge fail to act responsibly. The film not only tells the story of the event, but also serves as a grim commentary on corporate responsibility, or lack thereof. The final scene of Deepwater Horizon before the montage is pivotal in revealing Mike Williams' transformed character. Surviving the catastrophic disaster leaves Mike with more than just physical scars. He's haunted by profound disappointment and gloom. In this crucial moment, Mike enters a hotel lobby alongside fellow survivors. He's immediately approached by a father, anxiously searching for his son. It's clear from the context that the son is one of the 11 crew members who perished in the disaster. Mike's inability to offer any comfort or answers sends him into a panic attack, underlining his personal trauma and the weight of his new reality. The ending of the film drives home the human aspect of Mike Williams' experience. It's not just about the heroics and bravery. It's about the lasting impact of such a tragedy. The montage that follows starkly contrasts the film's earlier portrayal of Williams' heroism, focusing instead on the real-life aftermath. Mike Williams, portrayed as a heroic figure in the film, ultimately retreated from the sea and now lives a quieter life with his family in Texas. The film touches on his brave deeds, but also emphasizes his fear and emotional turmoil. Williams himself has spoken about the psychological toll of reliving the disaster. He described the film as anxiety-inducing, noting how vividly each critical moment replayed in his mind. He shared with people that he struggled with PTSD and survivor's guilt for over 2 years after the event, highlighting the deep and lasting effects of the disaster. The Deepwater Horizon movie showed that the oil spill was the worst environmental disaster in U.S. history. The film's postscript reveals the staggering figures. The blowout lasted for 87 days, spilling an estimated 210 million gallons of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. The real-life consequences were even more devastating. Scientists from the National Ocean Service reported that the spill resulted in the deaths of thousands of marine mammals and sea turtles and caused severe contamination of their habitats. The disaster claimed 11 lives, injured 17 people, and left an indelible mark on the environment. The film captures the gravity of the event, but the reality of the disaster extends far beyond the screen.